The Unreal Engine 5.6 preview is out, meaning everyone has access to it now. But with it comes some pretty major UI changes for the viewport. And I know when I first opened it up, it took a while to get used to. So let's dive in and get this figured out. So what we're used to looking at up here, we can see our previous version toolbars where we had our hamburger menu that had our options in it, like changing our real-time settings, showing our stats and FPS, high resolution screenshots, field of view, screen percentage, all of these things. We had our perspective drop down right here, our camera drop down that lets us change between perspective. We can go to specific orthographic views. We can also change between our default and our cinematic version viewports, which is going to give us things like our composition tools up here. Go ahead and change this back to the default viewport. Now we also had our view mode right here where we click on this. We've got all of our different view modes, lit, unlit, wireframe, all of those that we can use that we're all familiar with already. Plus our exposure settings down here. We have our show menu, which allows us to toggle off things like the atmosphere or fog, or be able to toggle on and off the grid, all kinds of different things in here. And then of course over here on this side, we have our translation tools. We have our ability to switch between world and local coordinates for moving. We have our snap to surface button right here. Then we have our movement, rotation, and scale snapping tools. We have our little button right here. We can toggle snapping on and off, as well as change the amount that we're actually snapping with. We can do that with our rotation or a scale as well. Then of course we have our camera speed right here, controls how fast our camera moves. Now of course we can also hold down the right click button and use our scroll wheel to change it to faster, slower, whatever we need to do. And then we have our button right here to maximize our viewport or change it over to something like a 4-up setup right here. And we can maximize any one of these individual viewports right here. It's kind of like hitting the space bar in Maya. So this is what we are used to right here. Now, the new version that ships with 5.6 changes this up a little. So we can see this toolbar up here that is supposed to feel similar to like a 3D modeling software such as Maya or Blender. So anybody who's used to working in tools like that are supposed to be a little bit more comfortable with this up. But if you've been using Unreal for a really long time already, then this can start to get a little bit confusing because they change everything up. So one thing that ends up being pretty useful here is that we can swap between these fairly easily. And we can do that with a console command. So this right here, the console command of ToolMenusViewportToolbars will allow us to change which toolbar version we're using. So we'd come down here and we would enter that in our command line right here. And for that, we have a couple of options. So if we do ToolMenusViewportToolbars 0, it's going to actually give us the old version that we're already familiar with. ToolMenusViewportToolbars 2 is going to give us the new version that we see up here and ships with 5.6. Now, you'll see that goes from 0 to 2, so there's another one in there with a value of 1. It'll actually show both versions at the same time, and that's what I'm going to use in here to make it easier to go through here and compare these. Now, I'm doing that with a little editor utility widget that I built, which I will give a download link in the description for you guys so you can use this as well. But basically this lets me switch between the old, the new, and both with just a button click. Now, when I have both right here, we can look at this and we can compare. So we know what we're familiar with already. So let's go ahead and look at this side of it, which is probably the easiest to notice the changes on. So basically we kind of took all the snapping stuff here and just moved it over to this section over here. Let's start with our snapping tools, we have our move, rotate, and scale. You're going to find those over here, and they've got some different icons. I don't really like these icons as much, probably because I'm so used to these icons already, but it's the same kind of situation. You can click the icon to toggle snapping on and off. You can use the drop down here to change the values, same with the rotation, the scale, all of that. You'll notice right here, we also have the surface snapping, which is now set up similar to how these are. So before, we just had this button right here. You hover over it and you click on the checkbox to turn on surface snapping, and then you have your settings. Now, we actually have a button to click and toggle it on, and then our settings in the drop down here. But next to these, you'll find this little magnet icon. And this magnet icon right here, if you click on this, it's going to give all of your snapping settings in one location. So we come down here, fly out for the location, fly out for the rotation, fly out for the scale. We also have some others like actor, socket, vertex, planar, and we can turn those all on in here, as well as we have the surface one up here. So really most of this up here is just kind of redundant. This gives us some extra stuff that we can toggle on. And then of course we have our cycling between world space and local space right here. So if I look at this, I'm going to take this guy out, I'm going to bring it up here, and I'm going to rotate it like this. Then I'm going to go back to my move tool. So world space is going to move this within world space, and then local space is going to move it as locally relative to the object itself. And we can just use this button right here to toggle between those as well. We have the 3 dots drop down, which lets you select it this way. Just a little bit of redundancy in there, nothing too crazy. And then of course over here we have our transform tools. So it's exactly the same as over here. So our select, move, rotate, and scale over here. We have select, move, rotate, scale over here. And of course, it still works with the Q, W, E, and R hotkeys as well. So that doesn't change. Then up here, we have this button, which is going to kind of add a little bit more redundancy to all of this up here. So we can change our mode here, and you can also easily see the hotkeys for that. So Q, W, E, R for each of these. We can come down here, change our coordinate system from world to local space in here. And then we've got some other options in here as well, such as the ability to show or hide the transform widgets, our actual scale for that, some changing between arc ball rotation, screen space rotation. Down here we have our selection options, which are pretty useful. So allow translucent selection, which is the hotkey of T, is a very useful one that lets you toggle on and off the ability to select anything that has translucency in it. So maybe it's like say a window that has a material with opacity or particle system, water, anything like that. Those kinds of things, if you toggle this off, you won't be able to select them. If you toggle it back on, then you will. So before, this was just a hotkey that you had to remember. And it's good to remember the hotkey because it's very quick to change it, but now we can just click on this if you ever forget it and come down here for that. Same with the allow group selection or not. We can toggle that on and off, and we've got some other options in here as well. But now I want to look at what we're used to seeing over here on this side. Now, over here, we see our camera drop down perspective. And if I click on this, yes, it's going to let us toggle between perspective, top, any of our other orthographic views, but it's also got some other things over here. It has our piloting controls in here. It has our camera movement here. We can actually change our camera speed in this right here. It has our frame selected option. So that's where when you hit the F key, it'll take you directly to it. Now we actually have that over here as an option. Should this be here? I mean, I think it's useful as a button, but I would have rather had it like up here as a quick button rather than buried in a menu. But you know, hey, it is what it is. We also have in this camera movements, we have things like the ability to move the camera to object. So if I select this, it actually puts my camera inside the object, as you can see there. And conversely, if we do move object to camera, it's going to move that object to where your camera is. This is actually really, really useful for when you're setting up lights and things like that. If you want to be able to look at a section, create a light here, you just drop a light in and then you would use that move object to camera option. Now we have our view settings in here, so like our field of view, near plane, far plane, all that. And before, these used to be over here in our hamburger menu, drop down menu here. So we would see those here and not over here, which was pretty simple, but these options have just been moved over into this menu. Also, our game settings with our EV value has been moved over here as well. So previously, we're used to seeing this over here under our view mode. So we go where it says lit, come down past all our view modes, and we have game settings to be able to toggle on and off. This basically just says, hey, are we going to use post-process or not? So if you turn this off, it's going to turn your post-process off just for your viewport, not for your game, and allow you to control the exposure value with this. Now, in the new UI, this is located under our camera right here. So we would be changing that in here. As well as we can change between default and cinematic viewport. We also see our create camera options here, which used to be under our hamburger menu down here, create camera here, and then our bookmarks right here that is now located in this, which are bookmarks. Remember, you can also create these with control plus a number, and then you go to them with that number. It's good to remember those hotkeys there. We see our ability to toggle the game view with the hotkey of G, which always want to remember that one as well. So turning game view on and off will toggle things like your widgets and stuff like that. And then our high resolution screenshot is now down here under this as well. So bringing this up, we can do our high resolution screenshot. And before, once again, that was under our little menu over here. So next up, we have our camera speed, which click on this, we see our camera speed, our speed scaler, same as this one right over here. There's a new option under here called distance-based camera speed that's supposed to change the camera speed based on a look at location. Whatever you're looking at, I guess, is supposed to go faster if you're further away from it. I tested this out and it didn't seem to work for me, so hopefully it will in the future, because it seems like a good little option to be able to use. Maybe they just need to iron that bug out. Hopefully it will be ironed out with the official 5.6 release. Then over here, we have our drop down for our view modes. So I click on this. We have all of our view modes in here, our visualizers down here, all of that. And it's pretty much the same as before, except for before we had our exposure settings in here. Now we don't have those. Those have, once again, been moved over here to the camera drop down. So then we've got these guys over here. So let's start with this one. The show flags button is an eye. You click on this and you get the drop down and you get all these things in here that you can show or hide, things like the atmosphere, stuff like that. It's the same as this show button right here. So I come in here and turn that on, turn that off, with the exception that now it also has the viewport stats. So if you want to turn on, say, FPS, you want to look at your FPS, you'd actually come to this one, you'd come over here, and you'd come down to FPS right there. Previously, if we wanted to do that, we would come over to our hamburger menu and come down here, and we have our show FPS here. But there's also this stats flyout, which we see this over here is exactly the same as what's included over here. So now if you want to do things like see your FPS or your units or anything like that, you're going to get them from over here. And of course we can toggle them all off with one click. Next up, we have our engine scalability right here. So this is where we turn on our real-time viewport off and on. So before we would do that over here, we come to our hamburger menu. Here it is right here, viewport options, real-time, and we can disable this to be able to activate that as well. This over here, now we're going to do it under this menu. So it looks like a speedometer. Also, we have our preview platform if you need to be able to preview what something looks like on on a certain device, our viewport scalability. We're going to find that in here. We used to have a little settings button up here for it that we'd be able to get to it. And then when you change it to anything other than Epic, we used to get a little thing up here to be able to swap between it. But that's going to be in here, as well as our material quality levels, our screen percentage. If you want to override your screen percentage, that's going to be under here now as well. Used to be over here under our hamburger menu. So you can see that pretty much what they did was they took the hamburger menu and got rid of it and took all the things that were in it and they put them in more relevant spots as they're related. So then next up we have this gear right here. We click on this. There's going to be some of our settings that we didn't have anywhere before. So we didn't have these down here before. And here we have a level editor volume. We have the ability to control things like our mouse sensitivity, our mouse scroll zoom speed, inverting, middle mouse pan, and the orbit axis, and the dolly and everything, scroll gestures, all of that. Now, this has always been in there, but it's never been really an option that you could change inside of the viewport, as far as I know. Where you would find it before, which we can get to conveniently from this button right here, was in the editor preferences settings. So you go into the editor preferences and you find the level editor viewports, and then you're going to find all those settings in there. So if you wanted to change any of these settings before, this is where you had to do it. Now it's a lot quicker by being able to do it up here. Also, we have this cascade menu, which lets us deal with some visualizations for the cascade particle system, which was replaced by Niagara many years ago at this point, but it's still in, and I'm guessing by the fact that they included this in the menu here, they don't plan on getting rid of it anytime soon. So if you are using some old cascade effects, they should still continue to work. Definitely they'll work in 5.6. They'll probably continue working for a long time after that. So then we have our little button up here, which allows us to toggle into our 4-up mode or maximize a viewport. And we have this little 3-dot drop down here, which lets us change what is going to happen when we do that. So I could do, like, say, a 3-up right here, get something like that, maximize it back, could go back to my 4 panes, maximize it back. Then also I click on this and we can see the setting for our immersive view, which is the F11 hotkey, which that's how we go full screen with our viewport here, like this. Should be familiar with that already. And of course, there's an option to restore all viewports as well. So now this is the new setup for our main viewport right here, but this actually affects all the other viewports in the editor as well. So I'm going to go back to the old one right here, and we're going to have a look at a couple more of those. So come in here to my UI testing folder where I've set up a couple things to look at this, and let's start with blueprints. So I'm going to open up my blueprint editor here. I'm going to go into the viewport, and we'll see up here with the old mode, it was very similar to what it is in the main viewport, because remember, the blueprint viewport here is just a localized world map in and of itself. So we had all of our things like the ability to do real-time, show or hide our floor, show or hide our grid. We could change between perspective and orthographic views like that. And we could change our view modes in a very limited amount. Of course, we had snapping capabilities, camera speed, we had the transform capabilities, we had all of this stuff going on in here. And then now in the new mode, things just kind of get moved around, and it's just like it was with the main viewport. So we come over here, we look at this, we basically see that it just has limited options compared to the main viewport, but it's pretty much the same kind of stuff. Now, if we come over here to perspective, this is where we're going to see things like our frame selected has been moved up to the root of our camera menu here. We come over here to our view modes and we see some pretty limited stuff, but we do see visualizers for landscape, which doesn't make sense to me I don't really know why we would need this in the Blueprint viewport, but you know, hey, maybe they're cooking on something with that. We have our show or hide here, which this just lets us show our floor, show our grid, things like that. And then our scalability one right here just lets us turn real time on or off. So that's what it's going to look like inside of a blueprint right here. Now, if we were to open up a static mesh and we're going to look in here and we're going to see these settings in here as well. Now, if I go back to the old, we'll see we have a couple of extra things that we don't in the normal viewports. So we have our hamburger menu, we have our camera, we have our view mode, we have our show to see all of this stuff. But we also have this button that says Epic Headquarters, which lets us basically switch between our preview scene, our gray wireframe, gray ambient, things like that. And we have our LOD drop down, which lets us set it to LOD auto by default or select a specific LOD for a mesh. If you're using Nanite, you're not going to be worrying about this at all. But if you are using the LOD mode, this lets you look at specific LODs. And then of course over here, everything's the same. If we go to the new version, we look over here, we'll see all of that pretty much stays the same over here. But if we look at this, our camera mode, pretty much the same kind of stuff. Lets us control our auto exposure within our viewport here, which is pretty cool. Our view modes, we have all of the ones available there. Our show flag, same stuff that we had, being able to show things like collision and stuff like that, useful in here. All of that's under there. Our LOD dropdown, we can clearly find that one. It says LOD auto here. It's the same. Our scalability one just lets us toggle real time on and off and set our screen percentage within this viewer. And then we also have this right here, this little icon for the preview scene. It looks like an image icon with a little gear icon on it. We click on this, we come down here. We can change our preview scene, but we can also turn things on and off like our background, our grid, our floor, toggle post-processing on and off, and go directly to our preview scene settings to be able to change anything with our lighting, environment, stuff like that. So that's what it's going to look like inside of the static mesh editor right there. Then let's go ahead and look at the material editor. So I'm going to pop into this. I'm going to go back to the old version and we're going to look in here. And what we'll see, go ahead and do that, is that we have our drop-down menu here, toggle real-time, stats, screen percentage, we got some layouts going on. We have our camera, which has our perspective, orthographic, our exposure settings, our view mode in here, which also has exposure settings in it. Our show flag doesn't really do anything in the material editor, so kind of a useless button. And then of course our preview settings, just like in the static mesh. Now if we go to the new version, what we're going to see here is our camera has our perspective and orthographic. It has our view modes here, our exposure settings. View mode version just has our view modes, takes the exposure setting away. We have our performance scalability to toggle real time on or off, screen percentage. We have our preview scene button over here again, just like in the static mesh editor. But also, if I go back to the old one, remember we had the ability to change what mesh we were looking at this material on. So we would do that by, say, I'll click on the cylinder one, the sphere one, we've got the plane, we've got the preview mesh of a cube. And then of course we have selecting whatever you have currently selected in the content browser. We'll do that in a moment because I want to pop over to the new version and we'll see those buttons have now moved up here and they've got some really nice icons. I actually do like this part of this UI a whole lot better. So here's our sphere, there's our cylinder, our plane, our cube, and if I wanted to say use this mesh right here to see what it looks like on here, I would select it in the content browser. We can see it selected down there. And then I come up here to this little cinder block, click on that. Now we have that there. So this actually is pretty cool how this is set up. I do really like that. Let me minimize this, go back to the old version, and we'll go to the Niagara system viewer. So we come in here and what do we see with the old version? Pretty similar to the static mesh. We have our drop down here, real-time stats, FPS, We have our field of view, screen percentage, layouts, motion options, our orbit mode, all of that. Camera is just perspective, orthographic, exposure. View modes with the exposure in here. The show button in this one actually works. Lets us toggle between our grid, things like our particle counts, all of that. And then of course our preview settings here. Now the new version of this toolbar should be looking pretty familiar to you right now. So I come up here, I look at my camera one. Okay, here's my perspective, here's my orthographic. My view settings are now in here. My exposure settings in here. Orbit mode can be toggled on and off in here. View modes just has view modes, no extra stuff in it now. Our show option has all of our show options before, and our viewport stats have moved over here. Scalability is just real-time viewport and screen percentage. And then of course, just like all the others, we can change our preview scene here, show and hide things like the grid, the floor, background, post-processing, stuff like that. And our motion options have moved over here into this as well. So this is what our viewports look like across many of our editors here. There are other editors too with our, skeletal mesh and animation and stuff like that. Very similar. Pretty much learn the new viewport here, and you'll very easily get familiarized with the other viewports that are in all the other editors. Now, in the beginning, I showed you that I've been switching between these with a little editor utility widget that I built myself, which is right here. This gives me my old button, my new button, and then my both button, and I'm finding both to be pretty useful in the learning phase. So if you're trying to find something up here and you just can't pinpoint where it's at, you can always go to the old one, swap back to this, or you could go to the both version and find it over here. So let's say I'm looking for my show FPS and I don't know where it is, and I have no hamburger menu button. I'm in perspective, it's not in here. View modes, it's not in here. Where is it? Don't have time to look for it. Just go back to the old one, come over here, there it is. We can toggle it on that way like that until we remember that it's, of course, over here in show, viewport stats, stuff like that. So this is actually really easy to use. Like I said, I will include a download link in the description for you. What you do with it is you're going to just download the zip file, and you're basically going to drop it into the content folder of your project, and then you're just going to unzip it here so that you have this viewport toolbar manager directly in your content folder. Inside of it, you'll see viewport toolbar manager.uasset. And from here, once you've got that in your project, you just come to this viewport toolbar manager folder. You're going to come into this, and let me go ahead and close it. You'll see this editor utility widget right here. You just right click it, you come up here, run editor utility widget, and there you go. Now you have it, and you have some quick buttons to be able to toggle between these, so you don't have to go in and put in the console command every time you want to switch. And of course, as an editor utility widget, once you bring it in and you run it once by right clicking and running it here, you'll find it in the Tools menu up here. Come down to Editor Utility Widgets, and there it is right there.